Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping right in to demystify the plant kingdom. We are going to dive deep into the biological plumbing and the truly fascinating evolutionary history of plants. We'll track their incredible journey from simple aquatic organisms all the way to the towering fruit-bearing trees that absolutely dominate our landscapes today. By the end of this, you are going to truly understand exactly how plants conquered the Earth.
To make this whole complex topic a bit more approachable, here's our roadmap. We're going to march through 6 major stages: classifying the plant kingdom, algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms, and finally angiosperms.
Okay, part 1, classifying the plant kingdom, from superficial traits to evolutionary relationships.
Before we can even look at the plants themselves, we really need to understand how scientists group them. Early on, systems like the one proposed by Linnaeus were purely artificial. They organized plants based on superficial traits, the shape of a leaf, its color, or whether it lived in a swamp or on a hill. But to explain this evolution in depth, we really have to look past those surface features. Environmental factors can easily alter leaf's shape, and that actually resulted in closely related species being totally separated. So today, we've shifted to phylogenetic classification. This means we're looking at true evolutionary relationships and common ancestors using deep anatomical, embryological, and even chemical data to reveal the actual, authentic family tree of the plant kingdom.
Moving right along to part 2, algae, the aquatic primary producers and the absolute foundation of aquatic life. Algae are incredibly varied in their physical form. We're talking about everything from tiny, microscopic colonial spheres like volvox, all the way up to massive, towering marine kelps that can reach 100 meters in length. But what you should really take away from this is their sheer global impact. Think about this. Algae are responsible for fixing at least half of the total carbon dioxide on Earth through photosynthesis. They literally breathe life into their immediate environments, providing the energy-rich compounds that serve as the base for all aquatic food cycles. Now, instead of getting bogged down in a random list of traits, let's explain in depth the biological differences across these 3 groups. Green, brown, and red algae are actually defined by specific biochemistry. Notice how their major pigments shift. You've got chlorophyll A and B in green algae, but then brown algae add fucoxanthin, and red algae use phycoerythrin. And even more fascinating, the way they store their food changes entirely. It goes from simple starch in green algae to complex carbohydrates like mannitol and laminin in the brown algae. So this isn't just about color, this is fundamental cellular engineering. Which brings us to part 3, bryophytes, the plant amphibians. They conquered land, but they're still tied to water.
Now we make a massive evolutionary leap, moving from the water onto the land with mosses and liverworts. To really understand how these early terrestrial plants function and reproduce, we have to define the alternation of generations. Basically, their life cycle flips between 2 distinct phases. First, there's the gametophyte. That's the main independent plant body you usually see, which produces sex cells. And then there's the sporophyte, which is a multicellular structure that literally grows right out of the gametophyte, relying entirely on it for nourishment to produce spores for the next generation.
Let's walk step by step through this mechanics because it is absolutely vital to understanding their limitations. The gametophyte produces male and female sex organs. The male organs release biflagellate anthrozoids, meaning they have 2 little whip-like tails. But here is the major catch. They are released into water. They absolutely must have a layer of water to physically swim over to the female archegonium to fuse with the egg. Once that fusion happens, the zygote develops into the sporophyte, which then releases spores to start the whole cycle over again.
Knowing this highly specific reproductive process, it begs a pretty fascinating question. Where can these plants actually survive on Earth? Why do we only ever find lush mosses in specific, damp, shaded areas? And here's the crucial point. Without ambient water, those male gametes simply cannot swim. If the environment dries up, reproduction halts entirely. This biological limitation is exactly why bryophytes, despite technically conquering land, are permanently tethered to moisture and restricted to narrow geographical regions. Yes, they are terrestrial, but their reproduction is still strictly aquatic.
So, let's look at part 4, Pteridophytes, the first vascular plants. This is where plants solve the gravity and water problem. To grow taller, to fight gravity, and to spread further away from the water's edge, plants needed a brand new kind of technology: internal biological plumbing. Notice the difference in their structural capabilities here. Bryophytes lack true roots and stems, but pteridophytes, They are the very first terrestrial plants to evolve actual vascular tissues. To explain the impact in depth, this internal plumbing, specifically xylem and phloem, is what finally allows plants to pull water and nutrients deep from the soil and transport it upward. It gives them true roots, true stems, and true leaves. Also, notice how the life cycle dominance shifts here. The sporophyte is now the main independent plant body. It no longer relies on the gametophyte for nourishment.
Next up, Part 5. Gymnosperms, the naked seeds. This is the moment plants finally break free from water dependence. While ferns evolved that amazing plumbing, they still required water for their gametes to swim. But this next massive leap completely solves that problem. The word gymnosperm literally translates from Greek as naked seeds. This is because their ovules are not enclosed by any protective ovary wall, both before and after fertilization. Look at how the exposed seeds rest directly on the scales of a pine cone, or in classic examples like the ginkgo and cycas.
This represents one of the absolute greatest evolutionary triumphs in Earth's history, the invention of the pollen grain. The male gametophyte is now highly reduced and packaged into a microscopic, incredibly durable grain. Instead of needing a puddle of water to swim through, these male gametes are simply released into the air. They ride the wind to reach the female ovule. This entirely eliminates the need for swimming. It completely freed gymnosperms from damp habitats and allowed them to colonize dry, harsh environments all over the globe.
And that brings us to Part 6, Angiosperms, enclosed seed dominance, the flowering plant revolution. Finally, we arrive at the most recent, most diverse, and undeniably dominant group of plants on Earth today. When we compare these side by side, it really reveals the final great evolutionary jump we're covering. On one hand, you have the exposed, naked seeds of the gymnosperm sitting openly in a cone. But look at the angiosperms. Their seeds are no longer left out in the harsh elements. Instead, the ovules and pollen grains develop within highly specialized structures we know as flowers. And post-fertilization, those seeds are safely and securely enclosed within fruits. Adding this extra layer of protection and using flowers to attract specific pollinators completely changed the game.
Angiosperms are nothing short of an evolutionary masterpiece. Because of their incredibly efficient reproduction and specialized anatomy, they boast an exceptionally large habitat range worldwide. They are absurdly adaptable, varying in size from the microscopic, floating wolfia all the way to towering eucalyptus trees that soar over 100 meters into the sky. What you should really take away from this is that angiosperms are the absolute bedrock of human civilization. They provide virtually everything we rely on for survival, from the grains in our daily food, to the fodder for our livestock, to crucial global fuels and countless essential medicines.
To wrap up our explainer today, I want you to consider this fascinating reality. Evolution never stops. We've traced these incredible innovations, from simple aquatic algae to plants creating their own internal plumbing, and finally to the brilliant engineering of pollen and flowers. So, as plant life continues its relentless evolutionary march, how might their next biological adaptations reshape the future atmosphere, our ecosystems, and the very Earth we stand on? Thank you so much for exploring the plant kingdom with me. Keep wondering and keep learning.